The Technova boardroom was suffocatingly silent. Dozens of engineers stared at the massive screen, eyes wide with confusion. $1 billion system 3 years in the making had been paralyzed for 48 hours, hemorrhaging losses by the minute. Does anyone in this room know how to fix this? Lucas Mitchell, the company's CEO, slammed his fist onto the glass table. We have some of Silicon Valley's top talent here, and no one even understands what the hell is happening. In the corner of the room, almost hidden behind a row of empty chairs, sat a 22-year-old woman named Jessica Washington. She was the daughter of Monica the janitor, who had quietly cleaned these offices for the past 15 years. Jessica had only shown up because her mom had asked her to drop off some forgotten paperwork. But now she was witnessing the most critical emergency meeting in the company's history. As the executives argued and the senior engineers scrambled to offer convoluted technical explanations, Jessica quietly observed the streams of code flying across the screen. Her eyes moved fast, scanning, analyzing with a focus no one noticed, until she did. In under 10 seconds, she spotted it. A single misplaced character, a tiny syntax error that had sent the security system into an infinite loop. "Excuse me?" Jessica said softly, hesitantly raising her hand. The entire room turned to her as if they'd just heard a ghost speak. Victorian Sterling, the notoriously arrogant chief technology officer, narrowed his eyes with disdain. "And this meeting is for authorized personnel only. I'm Jessica. My mom works here. I just came to drop off some papers." Jessica's voice trembled slightly under their scrutiny. "But I think I know where the error is." A wave of muffled laughter and sarcastic whispers rippled across the room. CFO Robert Hayes rolled his eyes theatrically. "Young lady, this isn't a game. We're talking about a system worth more than the GDP of some countries. We don't need random guesses from someone who probably doesn't even know how to code." Despite the mockery, Jessica didn't back down. There was a strange calm in her eyes, the kind forged from having endured worse judgment and learning to rise above it. "I get that this sounds unbelievable," she replied quietly. "But the error is in line 347 of the authentication module. There's a comma where there should be a semicolon." The room froze. You could hear someone exhale across the table. Mitchell furrowed his brow and stepped toward the screen. Engineers rushed to their keyboards, pulling up the section she mentioned. "Oh my God," Chief Engineer David Chun murmured. "She's right. How the hell did she spot that?" Within 2 minutes of correcting the error, the entire system roared back to life, smooth, stable, functional. $1 billion saved. In under 30 seconds by someone no one believed even knew how to turn on a computer. Lucas Mitchell stared at Jessica, unreadable. Victorian Sterling and Robert Hayes exchanged a glance, awkward, stunned, and very aware they'd just been outclassed by a young woman they'd dismissed as irrelevant. But amid all the stunned stares in the room, no one noticed the faint smile that crossed Jessica's lips. A smile that said, this wasn't the first time she had surprised people. In the days following that jaw-dropping event, the atmosphere at Technova shifted dramatically. Word spread like wildfire. A young black woman, the janitor's daughter, had saved a multi-billion-dollar system in seconds. But instead of admiration, what Jessica faced was something far more dangerous: suspicion and quiet prejudice. The next morning, Victorian Sterling called an emergency meeting with her closest subordinates. Seated in her sleek Italian leather chair with Stanford and MIT degrees framed on the wall behind her, her voice was calm but razor-sharp. "You honestly believe that some untrained, unqualified girl with zero experience managed to spot an error that our entire team of PhDs missed?" She tapped her nails against the table, eyes narrowing. Clearly she had prior access to the source code. Maybe through her mother, that woman has after-hours access to the offices. Robert Hayes, also present that day, nodded in firm agreement. "Exactly. I was thinking the same thing. There's no way someone from her background has that kind of technical knowledge. Either she got lucky or someone fed it to her." But what none of them knew was that Jessica Washington was far more than just the janitor's daughter. At 16, Jessica had earned a full scholarship to MIT for computer science. But she turned it down the day her mother Monica was diagnosed with cancer. Medical bills and caregiving duties forced Jessica to shelve her dreams indefinitely. For the past 6 years, Jessica had worked part-time jobs to make ends meet while teaching herself to code at night once her mother fell asleep. She took online courses, joined developer forums under an alias, solved complex problems on GitHub and Stack Overflow. Under the screen name QuashDev, she quietly built a global reputation in the programming community, earning the respect of top-tier developers from around the world. But no one at Technova ever realized she was the mind behind that name. 3 days after the fateful boardroom meeting, Jessica received a formal invitation to Victorian Sterling's office. It was a spacious room with floor-to-ceiling views of the city, curated to intimidate sleek furniture, museum-worthy art, and power oozing from every corner. But Jessica entered with calm, steady steps. Jessica Victorian greeted her with a rehearsed smile. "I just wanted to clarify a few things about the other day's meeting. I understand you were eager to help, but we can't allow unauthorized personnel to access confidential information." Jessica sat with her hands gently folded in her lap, her voice steady. "I never accessed any confidential data, Ms. Sterling. I only observed what was publicly displayed during the meeting." Oh, Victorian's tone sharpened. "So you're saying you identified a critical flaw in a billion-dollar system just by glancing at it?" Her voice dripped with mockery. She cocked her head eyes, scanning Jessica with a practiced coldness. "And where, may I ask, did you acquire this miraculous skill? What school? What degree are we not aware of?" Jessica felt the familiar heat rising in her chest, the same burn she'd felt at 16 when a private school counselor once told her to consider trade school instead of college, because she was black and poor. But this time she held her gaze. "I don't have a college degree," Jessica admitted, "but that doesn't make what I saw any less correct." Victorian leaned forward, her eyes glinting with quiet cruelty. "Let me make this clear, Jessica. This company invests millions to hire the world's top talent. We don't need well-meaning guesses from someone without the background to understand complex systems." Robert Hayes jumped in like a well-rehearsed supporting act. "What Victorian means is, we appreciate your enthusiasm, but here at Technova there's a very clear hierarchy. People like you simply don't have the knowledge to contribute at a technical level." "People like me," Jessica repeated, locking eyes with him. Her tone was calm, but her gaze had shifted sharp now, focused. Robert hesitated. "I mean, those without formal training, of course." Jessica gave a small nod, as if mentally recording every word. Years of being underestimated had taught her how to hear contempt even when it was sugar-coated, and more importantly, how to weaponize it. She stood. "I see. Thank you for clarifying the company's position." As she turned to leave, Victorian couldn't resist one final parting shot. "Oh, Jessica, it would be best if you didn't talk about this to anyone at the company. We don't want to create false expectations about future opportunities." Jessica paused, turned back, smiled just slightly. A smile so subtle it almost didn't register, but it made Victorian suddenly uneasy. "I understand. Some things are better kept quiet." After Jessica left Victorian and Robert exchanged smug glances, convinced they'd just put the girl in her place. They had no idea. They had just made a fatal mistake, underestimating someone who had spent her whole life enduring, observing, and preparing for this moment. That evening, while helping her mother with her medicine, Jessica sat quietly lost in thought. Monica noticed the tension in her daughter's face and gently reached for her hand. "Rough day at work, sweetheart?" Jessica smiled and kissed her on the forehead. "Nothing I can't handle, Mom. Just, some people still need to learn that intelligence doesn't come from degrees, and underestimating someone can be a very expensive mistake." Once Monica fell asleep, Jessica opened her personal laptop and typed in a login that neither Victorian nor Robert could ever guess. QuashDev. Her GitHub profile appeared thousands of contributions to major open-source projects, including systems that Technova itself relied on. Her forum history revealed years of solving high-level problems, all under that same anonymous alias. But that was just the tip of the iceberg. For years, using stories and access granted through her mother's janitorial badge, Jessica had quietly observed the inner workings of Technova, from its technical infrastructure to the messy politics of its executive board. Every sneer from Victorian, every backhanded remark from Robert, every dismissive glance from senior staff. Jessica logged them all not for revenge, but for understanding. Because Jessica knew one core truth: knowledge is power, patience is strategy. She began typing lines of code with surgical precision, her eyes lit with a quiet fire no one at Technova had seen or ever expected. They thought she was just a janitor's lucky daughter. They were about to find out that some people don't just survive prejudice, they turn it into fuel for a counterstrike no one sees coming. 2 weeks after that enlightening conversation with Victorian life at Technova for Jessica became a masterclass in observation and restraint. She kept her head down, played the humble outsider, as if nothing had happened. Until one rainy Tuesday morning, while organizing technical files in Victorian's office, Jessica spotted a folder left slightly open, inside emails. Correspondence between Victorian Sterling and a consulting firm called Hartwell & Associates. They weren't about innovation or leadership, they were discussing workforce optimization. Translated from corporate speak to real talk, it was a mass layoff plan. What made it worse, the timing. The planning started right after Jessica fixed the billion-dollar system. Victorian was plotting to cut the very engineers who had failed under the guise of efficiency and pocket commission bonuses for every termination. A blatant conflict of interest. A clear violation of company ethics. Jessica quietly snapped photos of the documents with her phone, a skill she'd mastered after years of helping her mom document labor violations at other companies. 2 days later, during her lunch break, Jessica received a message that would change everything. It came from her GitHub account. The sender's username, Technova Insider. I know who you are in real life, and I know they're criminally underestimating you. Can we talk? At first, Jessica was skeptical, but the message was precise, technical, and not written like a trap. After several carefully encrypted exchanges, she discovered who was behind the name Dr. Alex Chun, the son of David Chun, the lead engineer who had confirmed her discovery during the emergency meeting. Alex himself, a senior engineer at Technova, worked remotely out of the Portland office. In a secure call, he didn't waste time. I've been following your account for the past 2 years. Your distributed system solutions are some of the most elegant I've ever seen. When my dad told me what happened in the meeting, I knew instantly Quash Dev had to be Kesha Washington. Then he said something that made her go still. Victorian publicly took credit for the bug discovery. In executive meetings, she's been saying she guided a junior staffer to find the issue. Jessica clenched her fist. In the company's official records, Victorian Sterling is the hero who saved the crisis. She's using it to campaign for vice president of global tech. The big pitch is in 3 weeks. Everything clicked. This wasn't personal anymore. She wasn't just dealing with one arrogant executive. She was facing an entire system that thrived on extraction and erasure of people like her. Victorian hadn't just stolen credit, she was building a career off it. But Alex wasn't finished. I also suspect Victorian's manipulating the performance evaluation algorithm to justify the layoffs. If I'm right, she's breaking at least 6 federal labor laws. Jessica was quiet for a few seconds. Then for the first time in weeks, she smiled. Not the polite endurance smile. This was different, cold, focused, ready to strike. Alex, do you have access to the performance review logs? Not directly, but I know someone who does. Good, because what I'm about to do will need all of it. In the days that followed, Jessica began operating on 2 entirely separate levels. On the surface, she remained the quiet girl, the janitor's daughter, always polite, always fading out of view during tech meetings because she was not authorized. But behind the scenes, with Alex's help, she was building a case so meticulously damning Watergate would have taken notes. Alex connected her with another key player, Dr. Priya Iyer, a forensic data analyst working remotely from Technova's Boston division. After hearing the full story, Priya was furious. You're telling me they stole your discovery, then used it to justify firing others? That's disgusting. Jessica nodded. Priya leaned in. I have full access to all system metadata. I can trace exactly who changed what line of code and when. And just like that, the 3 of them launched a quiet campaign as precise and coordinated as surgery. Alex supplied internal access. Priya dissected the technical records. Jessica orchestrated everything all while continuing her day job like nothing was happening. What they uncovered was even worse than they had imagined. Victorian hadn't just stolen Jessica's credit. She had systematized it, building a career off the stolen work of young engineers for 2 years straight. Over a dozen key technical innovations officially credited to Victorian and Company records. Reality, she couldn't even tell the difference between HTML and CSS. Worse yet, she had manipulated the performance review algorithm to consistently lower the scores of employees of color while inflating the evaluations of white executives like herself. The evidence was undeniable. Statistical correlations, digital fingerprints, audio recordings from internal meetings where Victorian discussed how to manage diversity without compromising standards. And Robert Hayes. He was just as complicit. As CFO, he had approved massive bonuses for Victorian, all based on ideas she stole, slashed training budgets for minority employees. Priya summed it up, her voice ice cold. They built an entire intellectual theft machine and wrapped it in the language of merit. It's elite theater masking institutional racism. As the day of Victorian's presentation for Global Vice President of Technology approached, Jessica finalized her plan. She had everything she needed: time-stamped screenshots, recorded discriminatory dialogue, data analyses, proving algorithmic manipulation, shady contracts, commission payouts, and the paper trail linking Victorian to Hartwell and Associates. Then Alex delivered the final gift, the event schedule. It's a live-streamed global leadership presentation, all VPs watching. Every Technova office will tune in. Over 2,000 employees. Jessica typed slowly, her eyes steady. 2,000 witnesses. That's more than enough. That evening, while helping her mother with physical therapy, Monica noticed the gleam in her daughter's eyes. "You seem brighter today, sweetie. Something good happen?" Jessica smiled, kissed her on the forehead. "Just thinking about something you told me once. That dignity isn't something others can take from you. It's something you choose to hold no matter how they treat you." Monica raised an eyebrow, grinning. "And what do you plan to do with all that dignity?" Jessica's smile deepened. "I'm going to remind a few people that underestimating others can be the most expensive mistake of their lives." At that very moment in the executive suite, Victorian Sterling and Robert Hayes were still convinced the fire had been snuffed out. They had no idea. They had just given Jessica the three most powerful weapons she could have asked for: time to prepare a mountain of evidence and a global stage, with the world watching. They thought she was just a quiet little girl, the kind who stays silent when insulted. But some people don't just survive prejudice, they study it. They memorize every tactic. They analyze every smirk and dismissive phrase. They find the cracks in the armor and they wait. Then when the moment comes, they strike. That morning, the day of the presentation that would define the company's future, Jessica woke up at 5:00 a.m. Not from anxiety, but from anticipation. After years of being overlooked, today was her day to speak not with rage, but with precision, with truth flawlessly prepared. The main auditorium at Technova was packed. Executives from every continent were dialed in via live video conference. 2,000 employees filled the seats, all eyes fixed on the presentation that would decide who would become the next global VP of technology. Victorian Sterling took the stage like a queen preparing for coronation. "Ladies and gentlemen," her voice rang confidently through the mic. "Today, I'll walk you through how our strategic leadership team saved $1 billion investment from collapse." At the very back of the auditorium, Jessica sat silently, her laptop already synced to the internal network through credentials Alex had secured. Beside her sat Monica, her mother, who had taken special leave to watch whatever important thing her daughter had prepared. She held Jessica's hand tightly, her eyes glowing with pride. The issue was deeply complex. Victorian continued, clicking to the next slide. "Our best engineers worked around the clock, but it was my system architecture expertise that uncovered the critical flaw." CEO Lucas Mitchell nodded approvingly. On the massive split screens, global execs smiled and gave virtual thumbs up. Then suddenly the lights in the auditorium dimmed slightly. A second voice echoed through the room, calm, steady, but landing with the weight of a hammer. "Excuse me, Ms. Sterling," Jessica said, rising from the back row. "But there are a few important details in your story that you forgot to mention." Silence. The kind that tightens in the chest. Victorian froze on stage. Her mic was still on, catching every breathless gulp. "You're not authorized to be here. This is a senior executive session," she hissed. Jessica walked forward, unhurried. "You're right. But as the person who actually wrote the piece of code you're presenting, I think I have the right to tell the truth. Gasps, murmurs. Lucas Mitchell narrowed his eyes. What is she talking about, Victorian? Jessica stepped onto the stage without waiting for permission and plugged her laptop into the presentation system. My name is Jessica Washington, known on GitHub as QuashDev, and I can prove that every line of code Ms. Sterling claims as her own was written by me. The massive screen behind Victorian lit up with Jessica's GitHub profile showcasing thousands of contributions to some of the most respected open-source projects in the world. The auditorium erupted in gasps. Impossible Victorian muttered, her face draining of color. She doesn't even have a degree? You're right about one thing, Jessica replied, her voice steady. I don't have a college degree, but I do have something you don't. Integrity. She clicked again. The next slide appeared. Time-stamped evidence Technova system commits perfectly matched with Jessica's GitHub activity. But that's just the beginning, she continued like a prosecutor laying out charges. Dr. Priya Iyer, a forensic data analyst, uncovered something even worse. The screen changed again this time, statistical charts highlighting a disturbing correlation between race and performance scores, a pattern of systemic manipulation. Beside the charts, internal emails discussing how to manage diversity without lowering standards. From the second row, Robert Hayes began to sweat through his suit. This is all taken out of context, he stammered. Really, Jessica said, and hit play on an audio clip. Victorian's voice came through clear and damning. We need to be subtle, Robert. We can't just fire minority staff openly. But if the algorithm shows they're underperforming, then... The entire hall froze. On the video walls, international VPs exchanged stunned looks. Mitchell sat frozen in his seat, pale. This is a smear job, Victorian cried, her voice cracking. She's making this up. It's all fake. Is it? Jessica asked calmly. Then maybe you can explain the $200,000 kickbacks per termination wired from Hartwell and Associates, the firm owned by your brother-in-law, on-screen contracts, bank statements, and a web of corruption spanning 2 years. Ms. Sterling didn't just steal credit, Jessica said, locking eyes with the camera. She monetized systemic bias. Suddenly, Alex Chun appeared on the video feed from Portland. I confirmed the evidence. As a senior systems engineer, I personally witnessed the manipulation. Victorian turned to Mitchell, desperate. Lucas, you know me. We worked together. Mitchell replied coldly. I thought I knew you, but the person I knew wouldn't steal the work of a young genius and then try to destroy her career. Jessica stepped to the mic one last time. I didn't do this for revenge. I did this because I believe Technova deserves better. It deserves to be a place where talent is recognized no matter your name, your school, or the color of your skin. The auditorium exploded into thunderous applause. Victorian Sterling stood alone on stage, trembling, pale, exposed. And in just 15 minutes, she lost everything, her career, her reputation, and any future she ever had in Silicon Valley. Robert Hayes was escorted out of the auditorium, his phone ringing non-stop, most likely his lawyer scrambling to contain the fallout. And Jessica. She stepped down from the stage just as calmly as she had stepped onto it. Her mother pulled her into a tight embrace, tears of pride streaming down her face. For the first time in years, the world finally saw the real Jessica Washington. 6 months after the presentation that toppled 2 careers and reshaped an entire company, Jessica sat in her new office director of innovation and tech ethics at Technova. A panoramic view of the city stretched out beyond her floor-to-ceiling windows, once something that felt out of reach, now simply part of her everyday routine. As for Victorian Sterling, she learned a bitter truth. A ruined reputation in the tech world spreads like a virus fast and nearly impossible to erase. After a federal investigation confirmed multiple civil rights violations, she wasn't just out of a job, she now faced criminal charges. Her final attempt at employment was rejected by a startup that happened to be running on open source code Jessica had written, and Robert Hayes. His downfall was even more poetic. The illegal kickbacks cost him millions in fines. He was forced to sell his Malibu estate. Now he works as a junior accountant for a small business. His empire dream reduced to spreadsheets for local clients. Lucas Mitchell, once the cold, detached CEO, had transformed. At an ethics and leadership conference he shared, Jessica taught me this. True talent doesn't need a pedigree, it just needs a chance. Technova itself underwent sweeping reform. The new performance evaluation algorithm designed under Jessica's supervision eliminated systemic bias. Company-wide productivity rose by 40%. Diversity, it turned out, wasn't just ethically right, it was economically smart. Kesha Washington, who once quietly mopped the company's hallways, now had access to the best healthcare money could provide. She watched her daughters rise with glowing pride in her eyes. I always knew she was special. But watching her turn injustice into strength to lift others up, that's what makes me proudest. During a guest lecture at MIT, the very school she once had to give up, a student raised their hand and asked, "How did you stay calm when they humiliated you like that?" Jessica smiled and answered, "Because I learned something. Anger only burns the one who carries it. But wisdom, patience, and meticulous preparation, that's the fuel for real change." Later, Jessica founded Code for All, a nonprofit, offering scholarships and mentorships to youth from underserved communities. The program has trained hundreds of coders, many of whom now work at leading Silicon Valley firms. The greatest form of revenge, she often says, isn't destroying the people who tried to break you. It's building something so powerful that every limit they put on you becomes irrelevant. In a cramped rental apartment, Victorian Sterling watched a news segment about Jessica's global success, and for the first time she truly grasped the scale of her arrogance. She had underestimated a storm, mistaking it for a breeze. Jessica's story proves something powerful. Some people don't just survive prejudice, they turn it into fuel to rise and rewrite what success even means. While Victorian faced the fallout of a decade of discrimination, Jessica was building bridges toward a future where talent is recognized regardless of where you come from. The janitor's daughter had become the architect of a new technological era, an era where brilliance meets opportunity and underestimating someone becomes the most expensive mistake you could ever make. They judged her for where she came from, but she didn't just rise above it. She rewrote the rules of the game. If this story moved you, subscribe to our channel to explore more true stories, where brilliance, quiet courage, and relentless resilience have the power to change the world.